to the next session of this interdisciplinary refresher course on education, cinema, and society. And I am honored that I got this opportunity to introduce to you our next speaker, Professor Nikhila H. Uh, मैम रविंद्र मैम हैं मुझे दिख नहीं रहे.
Yes, ma'am
Yes,
is there.
yes, Sandhya.
Yeah. So, welcome, ma'am. Uh, Dr. Nikhila H. is a professor in the Department of Film Studies, the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, where she teaches and researches in the areas of film studies and gender studies. She has been teaching for nearly 25 years, first at Mount Carmel College, Bangalore, Pondicherry Central University, Pondicherry, and now in EFL University, Hyderabad for the past 11 years. She got her doctorate for her dissertation on gender and partition. She has organized seminars, film festivals, and workshops, and presently coordinates an online film discussion group called Talking Films Online. She supervises research in film studies, and 8 students have been awarded their PhD degree under her supervision. Her recent publications are on film remakes and multimodal translations between different Indian languages. Her current research projects include a commissioned essay for a volume on Shyam Benegal and for a collaborative volume on New Cinemas of India, where she is researching on New Age Kannada films. Today, ma'am is going to talk on Transgendering X, a discussion of gender, sex, sexuality complex via cinema. Thank you, ma'am, and we all are eagerly waiting to, enlighten us with your words and with your knowledge. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priyanka. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate congratulate Atmaram Sanatan Dharma College for organizing a program like this. It's not every day that we get to see such a sustained engagement and academic engagement with cinema. I was just listening to the previous speaker who ended on this note that more people from the academia must write about cinema. So I'll begin with the same exhortation that we should all engage more seriously academically with cinema. I also would like to thank the organizers, particularly Dr. Shubha Dwivedi, who has been in touch with me and who has asked me to be part of this discussion. When she first contacted me, I asked her for whom would this refresher course be, and she said this is an interdisciplinary group, and she mentioned the various disciplinary backgrounds from which the participants would be here. I'm really very privileged. It's not every day that we talk to our colleagues from different disciplines and talk about cinema that many of us are passionate about, in a forum like this. Thanking the organizers, I would now like to go on to my presentation. I have a PowerPoint presentation. If share screen is enabled, I will go to my presentation right away. Can I share screen?
Yes, ma'am, you can. You are the co-host.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I have called my presentation today Transgendering Acts, a discussion of gender, sex, sexuality complex via cinema. Before I begin with the presentation, I would also like to let you know that it's perfectly fine for anyone. If you have a doubt as we are going along in the presentation, you can just unmute yourselves and just seek clarification. If you feel that it cannot wait till the end of the presentation, you're most welcome to do that. Of course, at the end of the presentation too, I'm looking forward to a discussion with all of you. But in between, if there's something that is not clear, you're most welcome to just let me know and I would be happy to explain or go over the point with you. I begin now with um, explaining these three terms that I'm using together here: gender, sex, and sexuality complex. Chris Beasley's book Gender and Sexuality gives us a useful way of looking at the interconnections between gender, sex, and sexuality. Beasley talks of how the term sex throughout much of English speaking history has covered both sexed regimes, that is, sexed regimes, identities, and practices, which typically involve binary and hierarchical categories such as men and women, usually associated with an account of biology and reproductive function, as well as sexual regimes. So generally, we are familiar with the term sex, and we have used the term sex to kind of imply both sex regimes as well as sexual regimes, identities, and practices, which also commonly involve binary and hierarchical categories such as heterosexual, homosexual, and usually is linked to conceptions of biology and reproduction. Beasley chooses to employ the term gender, for sex regimes. So she talks about sexuality and gender in much of her book. Broadly deploying Beasley's categories of gender and sexuality here, I, however, retain the term sex also in this presentation to indicate the biological or material body, and use the term gender or gendering rather to refer to the process of imbuing social significance to the material body. So I think in most classes on gender or feminism, we begin with this distinction between sex and gender. Sex as something related to the biological or the material body, and gender as we explain it as a process of imbuing meaning to the material body. So we talk of it as a social process. So I'm retaining all three terms: gender, sex, and sexuality, particularly because in the context of some of the films that we'll be talking, I think it's interesting to look at how the material body, for instance, comes into play. How processes of gendering or gender manipulation, if one wants to call it that, or gender performance, happens in the social, in the various social contexts in the film. And of course, we look at both gender and sexuality, sex in the context of sexuality as well, or performance of sexuality. Sexuality would refer to sexual regimes, identities, and practices. Um, so I'm introducing a term, gender congruence, over here. If we understand gender congruence as the degree to which, as individuals, we feel genuine, authentic, and comfortable within their external appearance, and accept their genuine identity, this congruence is a process of being, becoming, playing, and performing. So I'm saying here that we are all attempting in some ways to attain some sense of congruence, some sense of making different kinds of identities, our sex identities, our gendered identities, and our sexual identities to cohere. And this is something that I'm saying is works as a process. It's not that one is born with a certain kind of a body and then one kind of embraces the identity associated with that body, the gender identity associated with that body. Over one's lifetime, in virtually in through every act of ours, through every performative act of ours, we try to attain this kind of congruence between our sexed bodies and our gendered identities. In this presentation, I take a cluster of films, the films that I have selected for our discussion. Some of you may be familiar with these films. Kissa, a 2015 Punjabi film, Jogwa, which is a Marathi film that released in 2009. Rudrama Devi, it's basically a Telugu film, but it has been dubbed into a variety of languages. So we'll probably also look at the Hindi version over here. And this film called Nanu Avanalla Avalu, which is a Kannada film that released in 2015. I think that these films are interesting because in their own way, all these films deal with the question of gender transgression, or with the question of incongruence between bodily identity and sexual identity, gender identity and sexual identity, and the strife for each of the characters. For the characters in each of these films is one of somehow working out a sense of congruence through the film. So because these films kind of make visible the lack of neat fit between sex, gender and sexuality, I have chosen these films. There's nothing particularly striking about these films, nor am I claiming that these are the only films that do that. I'm sure, at the end of our discussion, many of you will have many different kinds of examples as well. It just so happens that these four films provide a kind of useful entry point for our discussion on sex, gender, and sexuality complex. The films belong to different language cinemas in India. As you can see, they belong to different genres and styles of filmmaking. For instance, if you look at Rudrama Devi, it's a kind of Telugu blockbuster, set in a kind of historical context. If you watched Kissa, you will it seems like a realist film, but there are also it seems like magic realist kind of elements in the film as well. So they're all very different in terms of the styles of filmmaking, in terms of the way in which questions of gender come across in these films. Do they come across as melodrama? Do they come across within a realist framework? Yes, they are all very very diverse in that sense. Also, for instance, the Kannada film Nanu Avanalla Avalu, or even Jogwa for that matter, it may seem they may seem slightly offbeat, but within the context of Marathi cinema and Kannada cinema, these are considered as fairly mainstream films. So, how does mainstream cinema engage with issues that are so interesting and complex for us is also something I think that will come up in the course of our discussion today. The plan for the presentation is somewhat like this. Using these films, I would like to initiate a discussion on gender as a process, rather than understand gender as an identity that is fixed for all time for us. I would like to see gender as a process, sometimes a transformative process where we reject the destiny of our sexed bodies to embrace another kind of identity. So this is something that happens over time. So I'd like to draw attention to this, process that happens over time, particularly the context of some of the characters in the films we talk about. I'd also like us to talk a little bit about the relationship between sex and gender norms, and the norms of homosexuality. I mean, heterosexuality. As you know, heterosexuality is considered as a fairly normative and often in commonsensical parlance, all other forms of sexualities are dismissed as deviant forms of sexualities. So it looks like there is a particular material body that one is born into, that one, through the process of socializing, learns to inhabit that body, and then forms, compatible within quotes, relationship with bodies, with beings of those which are considered as belonging to the opposite sex or opposite gender. So normatively speaking, this is the equation that is held or upheld in our society. But in these films, what is interesting for us is precisely because they kind of disentangle this neat link that is kind of projected by our society as desirable or acceptable or as normative. So the way in which they kind of disentangle the relationship between sex and gender, the relationship between sex, gender, and sexuality are all very interesting in the film. Also, I want us, in the course of this presentation, to talk a little bit about the endless struggle that it is for individuals to bring about some kind of parity and congruence between what is considered as normative sex identity, normative gender identity, and sexuality. So it is like, in the films that we are watching, the characters whom we'll be talking about, it's not that they are so unusual or so out of the way, that that we need to talk about them, that they are freakish or that they are queer, and therefore we want to talk about them. I'm talking about these characters also as a way of talking about how, for every one of us, there is this struggle to achieve this kind of parity and congruence between sex, gender, and sexuality. What we see in the characters is something that is visible, is something that is made explicit for us on the screen, but this is not necessarily something that is that only these characters seemingly undergo, or they are exceptional, and this is why we are talking about them. So all these, in fact, the idea of gender as a process, the way in which the relationship between sex, gender norms and heterosexuality are attempted to be achieved in these different films. What happens when they are not achieved? I think it's interesting for us to look at all these questions, and of course the struggle that the characters and all of us probably undergo to achieve this kind of congruence. Um, in films, when we look at what I'm calling here as transgendering, we see a kind of mismatch that the characters in this film experience between their gender identity or expression and their assigned sex. So in all the four films, these are characters that kind of experience very traumatically this kind of mismatch between the gender identity and the sex or the material body with which they are born. The films problematize what is taken for granted. That is the relationship that we often take for granted. Yes, one is born with a female body, one becomes a woman, and then one, gets into heterosexual relationship with a man in adult life. So this is kind of seen as the destiny of most individuals, to live out their sex, gendered, and sexual identities. But that is precisely what these films problematize, and that's why they're interesting for us. The focus on transgendering then is not to draw attention to these characters as freakish, outlandish or queer, but to draw attention to gender not as a stable affirmation of a sex identity, but as a fluid, contradictory, combative, and transformative process. So it's only then that we will empathize with the struggle that these characters are undergoing. If we see them as somewhat peculiar, that they have been placed in very peculiar circumstances, that they are going through certain very peculiar transformations, then probably we may not empathize much with these characters. The films are also interesting because of the kind of questions that they give rise to. And these are some of the questions that I think these films give rise to. When and how do sex and gender not cohere in an individual? What are the circumstances where gender and sex don't cohere, when the material body and the process of socialization don't fit neatly together, or are not allowed in some ways in the context of the films that we are talking about. Why or how are they not allowed to come together, and what are the kinds of traumas that the individual undergoes as a result of that? What are the stakes in perpetuating incoherence? So, in some cases, it looks like characters who experience this incoherence, as well as the characters around them, seem to have a great deal at stake in perpetuating this incoherence between sex and gender. So, what is at stake? Why are these characters invested in perpetuating incoherence? How do they justify this so-called incoherence between sex and gender? If we assume that gendering is a social process, as we do in this discussion, what is the social value that is ascribed to one's sex? And you'll see that question come up time and again in the context of the films that we'll be talking about. What is the social value ascribed to the sex that one is born into? What is the price paid by the individual for coherence? So, if one wants to set right, so to speak, the incoherence and embrace coherence in some form of fashion, what price does the individual have to pay, to secure this coherence? And what is the price that the individual has to pay for perpetuating the incongruence or the incoherence? So, can the person attempt to perpetuate coherence or incongruence? When, under what circumstances does that happen? How is that allowed? So, I'm just throwing, at you some of these questions at this point, so that when you watch the few clips and also go through the discussion of the films with me, they'll come back to you. what are the attempts made by the individual or by others to force coherence. So if the individual is kind of bent upon perpetuating the incoherence, what are the attempts made by others to force a kind of coherence on this character. There are also very interesting questions that these films give rise with respect to sexuality. So, what are we just saw in the previous slide the kind of questions that arise when there is incoherence between sex and gender. Now, what are the kinds of sexual pleasures afforded to an incongruent self? How is sexuality used as a site to achieve congruence by the individual? How does sexuality become the site for playing or performing gender or gendered identity? Is one comfortable playing one's gender in a sexual relationship? If not, how does one manipulate one's sex for sexual ends? So we're really talking about all these three as if in a flux: sex, gender, sexuality, as if they are endlessly manipulable. And that's what happens in some of the films, in the different contexts in the films that we'll be talking about. I know I'm kind of giving you these questions in the abstract, but it's important for us, to see the kind of issues that the film raised, because ostensibly, as we watch them, we might just think of them as, oh, this is a blockbuster, or this is a kind of parallel film. So we may not pay attention to some of the things that the film. I mean, the idea of the film is to tell you a story. Narrative cinema, the main aim of narrative cinema is to tell you a story, right? But in the course of telling you these very fascinating stories, these very absorbing, kind of stories, narrative cinema is also posing certain, very interesting questions. And to me, some of these questions that these films raise are very interesting. Look at four films, and I've kind of grouped them into two sets. Two sets of films. In the first set, we will be looking at Kissa and Rudrama Devi, the Punjabi film, and the Telugu film. Um, what brings these two films, from very different genres, from different languages together, is that in both these films, a baby that is born female is brought up, as a man, is brought up as a boy or brought up as a man. What are the circumstances in which this happens, and why this needs to be perpetuated, and this incongruence that I was talking about between the sexed body and the the socializing process, the gender identity. Why this incongruence is kind of foisted on these bodies to begin with is interesting for us to ask and to look at. The second set of films are Jogwa, the Marathi film, and Nanu Avanalla Avalu, which is a Kannada film. In this film, these two I have grouped together because in both instances, the male has to, in the case of Jogwa, again, it's something that is forced by, you can call it religion, custom, or tradition. So the male body has to feminize itself, wrap itself in a sari, and feminize itself when it is dedicated to goddess Yelama. So Jogwa looks at the male having to, embrace the identity of woman. And in Nanu Avanalla Avalu, the child, the boy kind of disavows his the identity that is given to him in his family, the material body that he's born with, and the film traces the process of his transition into becoming a girl. Why that happens and how that happens is itself a very interesting segment of our discussion. Um, I'm now going to talk a little bit briefly about the first two set of films, Kissa, and also, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the details that about these films in case we have not watched it. This is a film directed by Anup Singh. It has Irfan Khan, Tilottama Shom, and Tiska Chopra in among others. It's an international collaborative film, involving Netherlands, Germany, France, and India. So, for those who haven't watched this film, it is about this young boy, Cover, that is a person who is brought up as a boy or a man by Amber Singh. At birth, it's announced that a boy has been born, so to speak, in the household. We'll watch that particular sequence in just a moment. And Kanwar is brought up as a boy or a man by his father. So the process of socialization itself is very interesting. So he's born, or he's brought up as a boy after a series of girls in the family. So his siblings are all his sisters, and his siblings kind of resent the special, significance and attention that Kanwar gets. He's made much of as a boy, as a man. And there's a backstory as to why or what is at stake for the father in, kind of bringing up Kanwar as a man. So this is a context set, this is a film set in the context of partition, or it begins rather at the time of partition. The sense of emasculation that Amber Singh feels, having to leave his home and hearth and move to a different place, somehow can be mitigated. He feels, Amber Singh feels, if only he has a son. And if it's not like, if he cannot have a son, in the sense, if his wife cannot give birth to a son, then he will transform the baby that has been born into a son. So all this kind of, is a way in which the film emphasizes this precisely this point about incongruence that I have been talking about earlier. This way in which the father ensures that Kanwar is brought up as a boy, believes and thinks of himself as a boy and nothing else. In the, as we go along in the film, Kanwar kills the father. A whole series of incidents happen leading up to the killing of Amber Singh, but she's unable to mitigate. So, would you expect Kanwar to go back and embrace her identity as a girl at that point, now that her father is not there? The film tells us how impossible that is, how she's unable to mitigate what he has done to her, and it looks as if the father's ghost kind of envelops the body and being. And even when afforded the opportunity to embrace a new gender identity for herself, the father's ghost gets the better of her, and she continues, perpetuating this incongruence. Kanwar is condemned to a lonely, in between state with no one left. That's how the film ends. That's when it goes into its, what I called the magic realist segments, where the ghostly remnants of the father alone remains, and it seems to have taken possession of the body. As you can see from the poster, these are the aesthetics of Telugu mainstream commercial blockbuster cinema. It's also been dubbed into various languages. It's directed by Gunashekhar. It has a very large star cast, all big names. For those of you who are not familiar, these are very big stars in the Telugu film industry. It's a multi-starrer with lavish production values. In this film too, this is a film that kind of calls itself a historical film set in 13th century. King Ganapati Deva of the Kakatiya dynasty is ruling over Oragallu, or Warangal as it is called today. And he announces the birth of a son, Rudradev, and this is announced again very much in the manner of the earlier film, in order to fob off pretenders to the throne and threats to the dynasty. Years later, when it is revealed that Rudradev is Rudramadevi, initially it's not all seamless, this transition from Rudradev to Rudramadevi. But finally, Rudramadevi successfully does what a son is expected to, that is, protect the father's kingdom and legacy. I'll just stop this screen share for the moment, and I'd like to just take you to the films, a few clips from the films that we are watching. Um, I'll begin with Kissa, and before I start this clip, a little bit about at what point we are picking up the story. We are entering into the narrative. As I said, Ambar Singh has made his way from what becomes Pakistan to India. He's a successful timber merchant. His wife has had a string of girls, so he's right at the beginning, he's kind of hopeful that the next baby that his wife is pregnant with will be a boy. So it looks like there's a kind of resolve or a plan that Amber Singh is working with. And that's what we see in this sequence. It's a slightly longish sequence. We'll try to go through this sequence with few technical issues, and then maybe also go on to the discussion from here. Are you able to see this screen? The film screen? Yeah?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, yeah. So I'm playing the film. Yeah. We'll also go to the next film, and then we'll talk about both the films together. Rudrama Devi, and then we talk about both the films together. Are you able to see the screen? Yeah. So let me go back to my slide at this point. Yeah. Uh, in both, as you could see, there's a lot at stake. It is, in some ways, as we notice right from the beginning in Kissa, what is a woman good for and what is a man good for. So, this is discussed in the beginning when they're having this conversation about how the son will be there to take care of the wedding of his the wedding expenses of his sisters. The mother has her property from her natal family, but it means nothing to her husband, whereas it is the patrimony and the patrilineal that is considered as very significant and as very important. And in both cases, to perpetuate the male line, to perpetuate the father's, possessions of father's kingdom. In the case of Rudrama Devi, it is very important that the child which is born is announced as male or announced as the rightful male heir, to the Kakatiya throne. So there is a great deal of social value assigned to growing up or becoming a man in our society, and which is how in both these instances, in Kissa as well as in Rudrama Devi, we see how the process of naming the child's identity, the newborn baby's identity begins at birth, and a kind of dissonance is set in motion between the sexed body and the identity which is now going to be ascribed to that baby. Um, we also see, how the stakes are very high. It's the kingdom. In the case of Rudrama Devi, it is all that the father hopes, all the hopes that he has invested in a son. In the case of Kissa, so which is how this kind of dissonance, so to speak, are inscribed into the body at birth in both instances, Kissa and in Rudrama Devi. So, sun is also seen as the link between the ancestors and future progeny, the one who has to bear the burden of perpetuating the legacy or the lineage. So, in that sense, for both, it's extremely important to name the heir, name the successor as male, even if it means reassigning a different identity or an identity, that is different from the sexed body, or creating this schism between the sexed identity and the gendered identity, and not allowing for a neat fit between the two. For lack of time, I don't think we'll be able to watch too many clips, so I won't go into all these clips so that we get time to look at least some portions of all the films that I'd like to discuss. But there are, very interesting parallels in the way in which the gendered body or the gendered identity is now sought to be matched with a fitting sexed body. So there is an attempt to transform the body also to, in some ways, match up with the the gender identity that is foisted, on the two growing children. So there are attempts, at altering the body culture. There is a Pailwan who comes in Kissa and attempts to strengthen the body, make it hard, more masculine. In the case of Kissa, in the case of Rudrama Devi too, the growing child learns, all the arts and all the learns to use the weaponry as a man would do. So in some ways, it's not here the gender trying to fit the body, rather it is an attempt to restructure the body in order to fit the identity that has been assigned to the children in both cases. So there is an attempt in this case, in both the cases, where the male elders bring about or try to bring about congruence between the act of naming as male and the transformation, of the material body to match the act of naming. In complicity or otherwise, there are gains in the incongruence for the child. So that is again what is interesting in both Kissa and Rudrabadevi. In Kissa, the child that grows up as male feels very special, feels that his father considers him very special, and so there are special leverages that the child can take as a result of growing up male. So also in Rudrama Devi, that one is not a female and one is a male, also entitles one to certain privileges. So there are investments in perpetuating that incongruence for the individual as well, for the characters as well, the growing characters as well. There is also an attempt in both cases. In fact, not just an attempt, there is marriage as well that happens to both the characters. And what is projected as a heterosexual marriage in both cases. So in Kissa, since the character is growing up, the child is growing up as a boy and now is a man. So there is he has to marry a woman, right? So and that is how the marriage takes place in Kissa, and so also in Rudraba Devi. So marriage is seen as another process of legitimizing gender and heterosexuality, or the heterosexuality that is kind of socially projected is seen as again an affirmation of the gendered identity in both cases. So it's seen as, in this case, a way of performing, masculinity in both, the heterosexual union. And in both cases, we see the wife, but in one instance, in Rudrama Devi, The wife knows what she is getting into and plays along. Whereas in Kissa, the wife is not ready to play along. In fact, the conflict in the film is precisely because the wife doesn't play along with the fiction that is attempted to be stabilized through this union. As a result of the so-called disclosure that happens both in Kissa and in Rudrama Devi. In Kissa, when the disclosure happens, we find that the character reacts almost in a kind of revolting fashion. He revolts against the idea that he is woman, or he has to embrace his femaleness. So if to be man is to learn to grow up hating all that is woman, the attempt to play woman is also an attempt to deal with self-hatred and revulsion. And this we find particularly violently played out in Kissa, when the character disavows the attempt. He says it feels like there are scorpions on my body if I try to act like a woman or become like a woman, because one also has to deal with the way in which our society has taught men to hate women. So it also means that one has to deal with self-hatred. In Rudrama Devi, to play woman is also to deal with the consequences of loss of power. So, as a prince, all the power that he had over the kingdom is now taken away from him. He suffers. I mean, he's exiled now. That she's now it's recognized as Rudrama Devi. She has to be exiled. She cannot continue to remain in the palace. So there's a lot of loss of power and prestige in playing woman. Now I move to the second set of films, Jogwa and Nanu Avanalla Avalu. So, Jogwa, just a second. Yeah, is a Marathi film directed by Rajiv Patil. It has Mukta Barve, Upendra Limaye, a whole host of performers. Uh, the film is apparently based on three novels about Joktas, which it kind of weaves into one narrative. So Joktas and Joktis are those who are dedicated to goddess Yelama. Though the film kind of you can say is about social reform, it chooses a melodramatic style of narration. So it's a kind of melodrama. Jogwa refers to the alms, given to a jokta or a joktin who are dedicated, a man or a woman who are dedicated. I mean, again, a man, woman, this is a misnomer in this particular context. Because the man also has to dress in female attire or has to feminize himself. So these are dedicated to goddess Yellama, and this is how the community is allowed, their livelihood. Joktas are hijras or men who dress as women in the service of Yellama. Joktis are devadasis, so-called servants of God who cannot marry. They must be, available for sexual labor. That is the function of both Joktas and Joktis. The film explores what the desire to marry means in such a scenario. So, when the characters desire to marry, that is, engage in a heterosexual relationship, what happens to the sex gender incongruence that is created by being jokta and jokti. So that's what the film kind of tries to explore. Nanu Avanalla Avalu is a Kannada film directed by B.S. Lingadevru. It has Sanchari Vijay, a host of transgenders who play themselves in the film. This film is based on Living Smile Vidya's autobiography called I Am Vidya. The film is about one who is assigned by sex or by body, as male, but who loves to play woman. He grows up in a milieu where he feels that to be part of this world of women is nurturing, is to get security, is to get a sense of happiness. So his loneliness and isolation, because he cannot remain for long in the world of women, draw him close to the only one who shows him some sympathy. That is his classmate Govindu, a man, and this gives rise to homosexual inclinations early on. So this is a child who feels threatened among boys of his age, probably because they find him different from them, and Govindu is the only one who kind of accepts him as he is. And That's how this film traces the journey of how Madesha undertakes sex reassignment to transform from Madesha to Vidya. So in this process of transformation, we see his attempts to deal with his sexuality. So, if heterosexuality is considered as normative in our society, how does Madesha deal with his feelings of homosexuality? How does he make his sexuality cohere, or rather, to become normatively heterosexual? It seems like this character has to transform his material body and become man by become woman by undergoing sex reassignment surgery, so that he can feel secure in a heterosexual kind of relationship. So we see here then the struggle that this character undergoes between the body that he is assigned at birth, the feelings and the social atmosphere where he identifies with the world of women, his growing sense of homosexual inclinations, which is something that is difficult to deal with. So the way in which he feels, therefore, that he has to transform his body by becoming woman, then he would be in a normative heterosexual kind of relationship. So this is the arc, in some ways, that the film traces. Let's watch the scene that we are watching. Is this dedication scene in Jogwa, where the man is dedicated to Yelaba, and then is from that moment onwards he has to be attired in sari, and this is also the dedication of the woman as a Devadasi. So we'll just I'll stop sharing this, and we'll just go to yeah. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. These are the religious rituals around dedication that is happening.
ಕಾರಣ.
Yeah, I'll just stop this at this point and go back to my slide. So, sorry, just a second. I think my screen sharing just disappeared. I'll just go back to my slide. Yeah. So, in both these films, as we saw, it's about the way in which in Jogwa, Tayappa is forcibly dedicated to goddess Yellama and is forced to play woman. Um, so again, it's something that he cannot reconcile with. Again, this sense of incongruence that I was talking about. So this is something that he simply cannot come to terms with, because this is a forced dedication. So he has to now be available to other men as a woman, so to speak. So playing woman also means being the target of homosexual advances. Heterosexuality, or the relationship that he kind of tries to have with Suli, the other Jokti whom you saw on screen, who's also dedicated to the goddess, becomes a means for Tayappa of playing gender incongruence with sex. In other words, he feels that his heterosexual relationship with Suli is one way of performing his masculinity. When on other occasions he has to be available as for homosexual relationships with others. At least with the case of Suli, he feels that he's not entirely emasculated. He feels that he can perform his maleness or his masculinity in his relationship with Suli. So this is something we haven't watched yet, I think. So we'll just watch this little sequence and then I'll come back. Yeah. Okay, so this is the sequence. We are watching the sequence where the boy is trying out the attire of his sister, and is preening in front of the mirror in the attire of his sister. We'll just watch this sequence and then we'll talk about it.
ಗುಬ್ಬಚ್ಚಿ ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೆ ಒಂದು
ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಇಲ್ಲಿ?
Yeah, we'll stop at this point. Let me go back to my slide. Yeah. So as we see here, he feels very secure in the company of his mother and sisters, Madesha, as he's growing up. And as a child, he's not part of the segregated world of male and female that happens much later in life. So he feels secure growing up in the proximity of his sister and mother. But as you saw in the screen, in the scene that we just witnessed, it's something that is completely unacceptable to the father. So a child's play acting seems to threaten the very foundations of not only his own masculinity but the masculinity of the father as well, as we see in this scene. The kind of homosexual feelings which early on, whether one wants to call it homosexual or just feelings of being secure in the company of Govindu, which later the child or the boy recognizes as homosexual feelings, turn him more strongly away from the gender that he's supposed to be socialized into, that is as a boy. So by playing female, he tries to align his gender to his sexuality. And finally, the castration that he undergoes through a sex reassignment surgery is his attempt at trying to align his gender and sex to sexuality or to normative heterosexuality. Now, for some quick overall points about Jogwa, and then we can go on with the discussion. Jogwa and Nanu Avanalla. Sexuality is more central to the process of attempting to seek congruence between sex and gender. So, in the relationship between Suli, in the heterosexual relationship with Suli, that's how Tayappa feels that he is, somehow more masculine, that he is manly in engaging in a heterosexual relationship with Suli. So this gives him a sense that he is not, emasculated. Sex is never an adequate basis for being recognized as man. Gender is also about being recognized as such. So that is something that comes across very strongly. Playing man is also about being in a heterosexual relationship in a particular kind of way. Only Suli provides the affirmation for his performing as male. In Nanu Avanalla Avalu, young Madesha seeks the sanctuary of the female world. That's the world which becomes his. There are very few males who are non-threatening to his ego, and he kind of develops a strong, which later seems like a homosexual attachment to them. Grown up as a man, the world of women is out of bounds for him. So when his sister gets married, so it's a world that is segregated. So as a man, as a boy, you may be nurtured among women, but one of the ways in which you graduate into becoming a man is also by distancing yourself from the world of women, right? So that's something that Madesha feels, a sense of loss for. The only way he can remain in proximity to this world is if he feels, if he feels by removing the sign of his sex and then begins the long process of sex reassignment. So if he has to remain in the world of women, the only way he can do it is, through his sex reassignment surgery. So what others might perceive to begin with as homosexual desires, by playing woman and with the transformation of sex identity through surgery, becomes properly heterosexual. So this is the way in which we see things kind of take shape in Nanu Avanalla Avalu. So I'll stop at this point. I'll be happy to take questions, have a discussion with you. I'll kind of stop screen sharing at this point so that yeah. Yeah, so thank you. I hope it was not too disrupting to watch so many clips in between, and I hope that you had a clear sense of what I was trying to say in this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for such an enlightening, organized, and very enriching session. The chat box full of compliments tells that how much they enjoyed it. There is not much time left, but still I take few questions with your permission. Um, Dr. Rashi Mishra is an observation. She says that new dimensions were discovered in the session. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this in-depth information. There is this suggestion, I should say, by Tara N. And she talks about that wonderful presentation. Thank you taking us through this much needed discourse via the amazing movies that I at least hadn't heard of. Will surely check them all out, ma'am. Your subject reminds me of a beautiful blog run by Dr. Trinithara Haldar Gumaranchu, India's first trans women doctor, if I remember correctly, the Bob's and Vijayan Diaries, wherein she pours her heart out on the stigma trans people carry and go through each and every day. So she has suggested that people must go and have a look at this blog, because that really talks about that dilemma, the struggles, what they went through in their lives. And now I'll Debulana De, she says, is your use of the term incongruence deliberate? Do these characters not feel diaspora at any point, say Kumar in Kissa?
Yeah, incongruence, I would say, within quotes, in the sense that we are expected to, in the process of gendering, we are expected to somehow fit into or cohere with the destiny of the bodies that we are born into. In each of the films that we watched, however, it is this neat, so-called neat fit that is not, in some cases, allowed to happen. In other cases, incongruence is embraced for, various reasons. So I would think that sex and gender and sexuality and the norms, that are expected to cohere in a particular kind of way, when they don't cohere for various reasons, as we saw in our examples, in our case studies, then I felt that one way of characterizing the transformations that the characters go through is to see how they attempt to so-called, bring about so-called coherence. That it's not something that they want to live with, or even if it's foisted on them. Is it something that they struggle to perpetuate? Is it something that they try and go back on? It's very, very interesting, what these characters do with the so-called incongruence. I also want to, kind of qualify this term incongruence. I'm not saying that congruence is a natural state of being, or is something that we must all normatively aspire for. In fact, in all of us, I'm sure incongruence is the state, right? So that's why I said right at the outset that what is played up obviously visibly in these characters is also probably something that all of us will share. It's not just something that is relevant to trans characters or LGBTQs or whatever. I'm talking about gender, sex, sexuality being in flux, being incongruent and incoherent, probably in all of us. So I think I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Very true that how we all are trapped into these different things and all. Ma'am, there is this one more question by Mohini Savedkar. She says, enlightening session indeed. Can one state that in movies like Rafu Chakkar, Khiladi, and popular cinema, a man impersonates as a woman for the purpose of comedy, but never the other way around because power is invested in being masculine and not in being a woman?
Yeah, yeah. I think your point is well taken. I would, kind of agree with you. And also the kind of humor that arises. I mean, part of the trauma in Jogwa is precisely this for the central character, the kind of, the sense of emasculation. Whereas if you see in Kissa and also in Rudrama Devi, there is no sense of pain or trauma that the characters undergo, by playing man in that case, because everything that our society kind of lays out, the trauma happens when, it's discovered that this is not a man and this is a woman. But in this case, when in Jogwa, the trauma happens precisely because he is draped in a sari, and now he has to, embrace all that sense of powerlessness that being a woman implies. So, and I'm sure that's what gives rise to humor. I haven't seen all the films that you mentioned, but I'm sure that's what I think I agree with you on that.
Ma'am, I'll take this one more question. Is by from Dr. Avik Bhattacharya. Says Varkey Richard in his book The Hare Krishna Transformed writes about so-called gender equality, the equal and full opportunity. They mean the feminists are clamoring for. The equal and full opportunity are clamoring for is nothing more than the beginning of the end, because when women receive freedom or rights for equal opportunity, they automatically relinquish their rights to be protected. So even if men want to protect women as women demanded equality, they automatically forfeit their status for being protected. He has quoted this statement by Burke Richford and asked that what is your opinion on this one?
I'm not sure how this is relevant to what I have been saying. Uh, so I don't think it's pertinent to the discussion on gender and sexuality. It's not. In fact, I am talking here about men and women not as given categories, but as processes of becoming, right? So to think of them as if they are not just biological givens but also social givens, I think is somewhat problematic. I really have no opinion to express on that. Yeah.
Just some participants are seeking that, you had discussed or you have talked about that one book, I Am Vidya. So they are asking if you can suggest few more which they can read and which discuss transgenderism.
I think these days, this one I know because it's come in English translation. I know, some transgenders writing in regional languages, but I don't know if they have been translated into English. You can certainly contact me later. Whoever's interested, I can give you a list from what I know of the biographies or autobiographies that have come on this, come by transgenders. Yeah.
That would be great, ma'am. If they ask, we will share your IDs. If
Yeah, sure.
there is no problem, okay, and they can, ask such things to you directly, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Because of the shortage of time, I am not able to take all the questions and queries,
Yeah.
but it's full of like that. They are really, they enjoyed it thoroughly and they feel enlightened after reading this one. Everyone feels that it was well structured and well organized, and this issue, the way you have talked about all these like gender, sex, sexuality, and how they are interrelated, and the problems which comes out resulting the incongruency between them. Like, thank you so much, ma'am. On behalf of ARSD College, the organizing team, and all the participants, I thank you so much. I thank you for giving your valuable time, coming here and presenting these topics so nicely. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
And now, Ravindra, you can take the next session. Thank you.
I request Shobha ma'am, can you please take over?
Thank you, Ravinder. Thank you, Priyanka. After such a splendid session and such elaborate discussion on gender and